Welcome back to another episode of Right Here in Mass. Joining me today is Lucie Wicker, who specializes in empowering fitness, wellness, and active lifestyle brands through bold, story-driven content that captivates, connects, and converts. Known for dynamic commercial portraits and striking visual storytelling, Lucie helps brands stand out in saturated markets by crafting imagery that moves, literally and emotionally. Lucie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, it's my pleasure to have you. I believe you are the first photographer guest that we've had, so this is exciting to bring someone in a new industry on. For our listeners, Lucie's full bio that shows everything that she does is in the show notes, but I'd love to start off the show by having you share with our listeners more about yourself and what you do.
Thank you. I have been a full-time photographer since 2011, and I actually got started. Um, Wait, no, how am I gonna say this? Sorry, I've already screwed up.
All good.
I got started because I was doing a program at Boston University where they had us doing all different kinds of photography to see what we were interested in. And, we did weddings, we worked with models, we did product photography. And I really thought I was going to be like a still life photographer. I thought I'd be doing product or food. I even worked for a food photographer for a while. Um, and I took an environmental portraiture class. And in that class, I was really interested in maybe getting like a yoga instructor on a beach at sunset and doing some sort of like, beautiful portraits outdoors. It was in the summertime. And I reached out to a Pilates instructor who I knew a little bit. I had taken a couple of her classes and I just said, "Hey, would you mind posing for me?" And she said, "Absolutely." And we went to Castle Island. It was in July, and she showed up with two of her friends, one of whom was a stylist, and just had this whole, she just said, "I want to look fierce." And they had this whole vibe that they were going for. And just kind of went with it. And we had a fantastic time. I loved the creative energy. I loved the collaboration. And at the time, she was really taking off. She had just quit her full-time job. She was just starting to do fitness full-time. And so she used the photos everywhere. She would put
Mhm.
them on her website. She would use them to, illustrate her classes. And so other instructors were coming up to her saying, "Hey, where did you get these photos? I really like them." And that's sort of how I got into the genre I work mostly within, which is fitness. So
Mhm.
gym studios, Pilates instructors. And actually her friend who was the stylist who was there, I wound up collaborating with many times over the years. And I still work with both of them. But it was an industry that I really just fell in love with. I loved that these people were really trying to help their clients get healthier, get stronger. I thought what they did was so inspiring, and I loved working with them. I loved and still love capturing movement. It's a
Mhm.
huge challenge that is just I never get tired of it. It's always so fun. Um, and I love just learning and getting better at it every day.
Absolutely. I always say that referrals are the best compliments, and I feel like that's exactly what happened in your case, where it's like you worked with this one instructor, and then because she used those photos everywhere, it's like that's what led you to what it sounds like future opportunities and referrals just from people in the industry that she knew.
Yes, exactly. And it was nice that I happened to really fall in love with that industry. And at the
Mhm.
time I lived in Boston and the fitness scene was really just starting to take off there. All of the new boutique studios were opening up, plus the bigger gyms were just sort of coming to Boston all of a sudden, and everybody needed photos. And I
Mhm.
was there and I was going to every fitness event, every outdoor event, every opening, I was there. And it was great networking and it was great exposure and experience.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned that you went full time in 2011. Is that also the same year that you started your business, or did you start your business earlier than that?
I had actually I had a full-time job and I on the side I would sell prints. I would print like kind of nature photos or landscapes and I would sell them in craft fairs in the Boston area. So that was sort of my little side passion. And the more I did it, the more I really wanted to go back to school and learn more about photography. I really wanted to learn about lighting. I wanted to learn about commercial photography. I wanted to do more than just the sort of fine art side of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so now being in it, because as of the time it's recording, it's May 2025. I mean, almost 15 years, 14 years as of this year. That's super exciting that you've been doing it for so long.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. And I still have a lot of the same clients that I did in the beginning, and everybody's business is evolving, and my niche certainly has evolved while also still sort of staying true to how I started. And I love that. I love
Hmm.
how people have sort of gone from being fitness instructors at many gyms to either owning their own gym or maybe starting, nutrition coaching. It's just anything in the wellness industry has just expanded so much.
Hmm. And I'm glad that you brought up that point about things changing in your niche, because that was one question that came to mind for me is knowing that you took your business full time about 14 years ago, like how have things changed within the photography industry from 2011 compared to now, 2025, especially like you said, the movement, since that's what a lot of your work focuses on.
Yeah, a lot of it, one of the biggest changes I've noticed is the usage of photos. When I started, I was very like, these photos are very highly edited and I'm only going to give you a couple of them and they are going to go on your website. They are going to be, polished and beautiful and ready to go. And that was fine and people still use them for that. But slowly but surely, everyone said, that's great, but I really need more photos for social media. So
Hmm.
all of a sudden it went from being sort of, I need this to be on a billboard to I really need these for everyday content for my, Instagram, Facebook. Sometimes people need reels. It's really evolved in that sense.
Yeah, which is interesting too, because that is like marketing. So I think it's so cool to think about how photography and marketing are closely correlated in that sense, and how it sounds like a lot of the trends that happen in marketing also show up in photography and vice versa.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I'm curious to hear like what you've learned so far being a business owner, like being a photographer. I know you mentioned that you help your clients in saturated markets, and that's one thing that people mention about photography too, is that sometimes being a photographer can feel like it's a saturated market because there's so many. And so I'm curious to hear how you kind of balance that and stick out compared to other people in the area.
Well, one thing that I love about what's going on in marketing right now, and I actually heard you talk about it in the Instagram podcast you did the other day or webinar, and that is telling your own story.
Hmm.
In a saturated market where there's tons of photographers or tons of, fitness instructors or whatever, the more personal you get and the more you bring yourself and your own philosophy out, the more you attract the right clients. And I mean, I love how that's true across the board. I think for a very long time, I was very hesitant to get personal just because I didn't think it was relevant. I didn't see how my personal life needed to be shared in my business life. And now it's the opposite. And you don't have to get too personal, but showing a little bit of your style and a little bit of your own personal passions really helps when people are choosing to work with you.
Yes, and I love that you brought that up because that's what something that I always think about too is that people do business with people. So, like you said, like being able to showcase more of yourself and your life and your passions, I think is what helps to align those people. And it's such an important reminder for anyone in any industry really is to just have more of that personal connection. And so, this question may be putting you on the spot, but do you have any specific examples that you could share with our listeners about how you've done that, like how you've shown your personal side or your passions and kind of help to marry that with your business?
Well, I know that you've mentioned this, that you do this is sharing books that you're reading or,
Yes.
movies that you like. I'm from Boston. I love the Red Sox, like sharing sports teams, sharing, even where you live and things you like to do in your free time. I don't love posting too much about, personal stuff about my family, but every once in a
Mhm.
while, I share pictures of what we're doing. I share that I have children. I'm a mom, and I think that that definitely helps me connect with um, people who want to work with people like me.
Yes, definitely. One question that I'm curious about for you that I've heard from other photographers is that when you're working with clients, it's of course like a very intimate and vulnerable experience, especially if clients have like body confidence issues or they feel self-conscious about things. And maybe that doesn't happen often in the industry that you work in because it's fitness and whatnot. But I imagine that's a lot of work that you really prioritize with your clients, just making them feel confident and at ease behind the camera. So I'd love to hear more about your process for that and how you make them feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really interesting. If you were to go to my website, you would think that I am working with, the most confident supermodel humans. And I have to tell you that 9 times out of 10, people come to me needing photos and just saying, I don't photograph well. I'm not
Hmm.
photogenic. I'm not comfortable in front of the camera. Just very very visibly uncomfortable. And so the way I handle that is we do a lot of prep work prior to a shoot. We get really organized about what we're doing. And then when we start, I just try to be super relaxed, super friendly. I want people to have a good, comfortable, fun experience. So, I set that expectation right away. And as we start, I will show them the pictures we're taking. And more often than not, once they start seeing the photos coming in and they literally will say things like, oh, I actually like those. Then we're kind of off to the races and then everything is great. But it never ceases to amaze me how
Hmm.
people just are so insistent that they do not photograph well, when really you just have to trust your photographer, you have to trust yourself, and just know that we are gonna, make things that you're proud of together.
Definitely.
Yeah, but and I also like to say that, people shouldn't wait until they feel ready, because you may never feel ready. People always have an excuse. They want to get a haircut, they want to, lose weight, or, even in the fitness industry, people always have excuses. But I would argue that if you don't feel ready, photography can help create that feeling of readiness.
Hmm.
Because once you have these awesome photos, you're going to want to share them. You're going to want to use them to promote your business, and you'll feel ready when you have them.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it's key what you mentioned about like the amount of work that you put into preparing clients for sessions. And I feel like that's something that people don't always give credits to photographers for is that it's not just the sessions that they're doing. I mean, you are preparing all that time beforehand, all the prep work, and then afterwards, of course, all the editing and putting together the galleries. So it's very clear and very evident that you're one, of course, really passionate about what you do, but two, put in a lot of time and effort to create an experience and photos that your clients really love and appreciate.
Yeah, exactly. And I never want to have people feel uncomfortable. Like this
Hmm.
will show up in the photos. And if I was working with somebody who was just completely miserable the whole time, that wouldn't make for a good photo. So
Right.
we really try to take a step back and work with the person, get to know them, get to know their business, get to know their brand, and things just get a lot more comfortable from there.
Hmm. Yeah. And for anyone who's listening to this episode who either A, has never done brand photos before, or B, realizes that it's been a long time since they've done brand photos. Could you talk more about the benefits of one, just getting brand photos done in the first place, and two, when people might know it's time to get more done, if that makes sense? Like when they should have more photos taken so that they have a different experience ultimately.
I think it's always good if you have something coming up, like if you have a website relaunch or a rebrand of any type, if you have a new offer or an event that you're trying to promote or a new product, those are always great key times to get photos done. The reality is we live in a scroll first world. So if your visuals
Hmm.
don't stop someone mid scroll, then they're not going to read about your caption. They won't hear about your offer. They're just so important for grabbing the right person's attention. Um, and there's really no wrong time to get photos. But I would say it's especially when you have something new that you want to share, and a
Yeah.
first impression that you want to make.
Hmm. Definitely. And I know one thing too is that because you mentioned like with people having like a specific occasion that they might want photos for, I mean there might be certain props that people might want to include in these photos or certain poses. Like I know one thing that was tends to be big depending on your business is like if you do pointing, so that way if they want to put like text above their face or whatnot. I'm curious to hear how you help clients with like planning that stuff out of like knowing any props they might want to include or even just thinking about poses so that way they feel like they have a wide variety, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I really think that like you can't prepare too much for a photo shoot. I really feel like the more you plan, the more organized you are, the more you will get out of the day. The way I structure my shoots is usually a certain amount of time. So, I tell people, I'm like, if you know exactly what you're going to wear, or a rough idea at least, and exactly if you have a shot list, like you will get everything you need in
Hmm.
that amount of time. Um, I think, looking at what other people are doing to get some sort of inspiration. I also I have like a prep PDF that I send people. It sort of gives them ideas for props or styling or posing. Um, it's always good to just, yeah, see what other people are doing, see what inspires you, see what resonates,
Hmm.
and then definitely use that and bring it to your session. You can always ask your photographer, um, but the more research you do, I think the more you will get out of your session.
Totally. And at the time of this recording, we're just about halfway through 2025. So I'm curious to hear anything exciting that you have going on in your business, if there are any changes that are happening, or if there's anything new that you're going to be implementing. Would love to hear more about them.
One thing that I started doing recently was just while we're talking about content and how needs are changing and algorithms are changing, a lot of my clients really started being interested in videos, in reels, and social content. And I was actually a film major in college and I love film. So I thought about getting into video myself. And then I thought, why would I do that when I really am so into the photography and I have so many videographer friends and colleagues who
Hmm.
do such a great job. So I actually created a couple of packages that involve not only photography, but also social content, reels, videography. If you have like a much bigger need for video is so huge right now. It's just so important for helping convey your story, your brand story. And so I've partnered with some really awesome people to create these packages that it's just sort of an entire media toolkit that you
Hmm.
have. So you could go from, this sort of feeling insecure about getting your messaging out to having everything that you possibly need.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point too that you mentioned is just being able to kind of listen to what your clients are looking for and being able to create a service that supports that, which is exactly what you do with this, is just being able to understand what people really need help with the most and then being able to provide something that will give that to them ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the other end of that, a couple of times a year, I also do shorter sessions. I call them brand boosts, and that is just quick, 15 to 30 minutes. You can get headshots. Again, if you come prepared with a lot of ideas, you can get a lot in that short amount of time. And very often I have clients, and that's all they need. They
Hmm.
really don't need a big full day or half day production. They just want to be in and out and get some great photos to use, and social media and get an updated headshot. And I do that as well a couple of times a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone who's listening to this episode who is thinking about getting into the photography industry or maybe newer to the industry, I'm curious to hear what advice that you would have to give to them, knowing that you have about at this point 14 years of experience that you've built up.
My favorite piece of advice that is so hard for photographers because if you're a photographer and you have a camera that you're comfortable with and you have a good eye and you want to photograph everything. You want to photograph flowers and runners and weddings, and I cannot recommend enough niching down as much as humanly possible. I think it's a really good way to find your own style, your own unique way of looking at things and documenting things. And I think it's just a huge struggle for new photographers to sort of create that niche because we want to be there for everybody and we want to just take awesome pictures of everything. And I really think the more you focus on a certain area of photography, the better that you will get at it. And the more you'll be recognized for it as well.
Hmm.
So every
Yeah.
once in a while, I try to, I think about going outside of my comfort zone or my niche. And I always wind up coming back because I'm like, nope, this is what I really like, and this is what I'm good at, and this is what I'm known for. That not to be said you shouldn't try new things because you absolutely should, but um, I think once you are sort of getting it going in a certain direction, keep doing it. Just do it a lot, let everybody know you're doing it, and
Yeah.
it will come.
Yeah, I think that's great advice because it reminds me of a quote I read once, and I forget who said this, but it's the idea of if you're marketing to everyone, you're marketing to no one. And so that relates back to what you just shared about being able to really niche down and find the industry or sector that you're really passionate about and going all in on that. And that way you're able to, like you said, do work that you really love, but then also become known in that space because that's what you've been doing over and over and over again for so many years.
Exactly. And honestly, if people know you for one thing and respect you and like your work, even if they have a project that involves something else, they still will reach out to you just because again, you've gotten so good at that one particular thing, and they can always ask and see if you would help them with something else. So
Yes.
it doesn't completely pigeonhole you.
Yes, definitely. I love that. And I know that you're active in Women's Business League and other networking groups as well. So, and I know you mentioned that too earlier on in your career, like networking is really what gave you these opportunities. And so I always love being able to talk about the importance of networking with people because it's huge. So, I'd love for you to share things that you've learned about networking that people listening to this can kind of take and apply in their own ways.
Absolutely. I think networking is huge, especially for small businesses. And like we were talking about earlier, standing out in a crowded marketplace. If somebody is looking for a photographer and they can think of three off the top of their head, but they met you at a networking event and you were really nice and gave your card, I think that goes a long way. Also, while we're talking about networking, referrals, I have met people who would never have any need to hire me personally, but they know somebody who would ask and say, I need
Mm-hmm.
somebody in this. And they say, oh, I've got the right person for you. So you really never know when you go to these events who you talk to, where it's going to lead. But if you go and you're, upbeat and positive and approachable and engaging and asking people about their own businesses, um, it will come back. I firmly believe that they will come back. And I've had great experiences with networking groups, not even with just with referrals, but getting advice, connecting with people like me that I can lean on and we can support each other. It's
Hmm.
been huge, and I really can't recommend it enough, especially as a solopreneur, because
Totally.
you're home alone, or it's isolating sometimes, and it's great to go to these meetings. And I keep looking at the thing in your background that says get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because
Yes.
I think so many people are hesitant to do these things, but honestly, once you go, it's something always comes of it, I believe.
Yes, you're 100% right. And I especially love the point that you brought up that you might not meet someone who is going to hire you directly, but they likely know someone that they could send your way. And I think that that's a point that people often forget about is like when they're looking at these networking events, they're like, well, my ideal clients aren't really attending. And it's like, well, these people might not be your ideal clients, but they might have connections that are your ideal clients. And so, it's so important to remember that you're not just getting access to the other attendees directly, but you're ultimately getting access to their networks and the people they know that can really open up new opportunities in the future.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so, as we get closer towards the end of this episode, Lucy, one of my favorite questions to ask our guests is what their favorite local businesses are to support. So, I'm curious to hear what yours might be.
I work at a couple times a month. I work at a fantastic co-working space called the Collective in Situate. I love working there. I love the community that they've created. It's springtime, so I keep thinking about flowers. So I have to shout out my friend Meryl from Merrily Blooms, and also Jenna from Loon Flower Farm, both based in Situate. Um, And I'll say Split Rock in Cohasset, just because it's a great place to go for a beer and oysters in the summertime.
Yes, I was gonna say, especially this time of year. Lucy, this has been such a great episode, and I've really enjoyed having you on the show. And now I would love to give you the opportunity to share with our listeners where they can find you online in case I'd like to reach out.
Sure. You can find me at Lucie, Lucie, wickerphotography.com. I'm also on Instagram under Lucie Wicker Photo and LinkedIn.
Perfect. And I'll link to those places in the show notes that our listeners can easily click through and connect with you from there. But thank you so much again for coming on today's show.
Thank you for having me. This was great.